The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the English Language Learner District Collaborative, a new initiative at MTSU College of Education to give support, to give professional development opportunities for the people in our districts who teach and support and facilitate services for English language learners. Today, we have a group of people who represent 6 districts across Middle Tennessee, and they are sharing their expertise and thoughts on the issue of progress monitoring of language proficiency. And so with this, I will introduce Rose Murray from Fayetteville City Schools, our presenter today.
One of the last things we had, we talked about that we wanted to kind of find a program that some of you had mentioned that you wanted to find a program to do progress monitoring of language proficiency. I know with all of the RTI and all of that, I know we use AimsWeb. That's what we use. And so I went and I talked to some of my friends in Texas to try to find what they used, and I found a couple of programs. Then in the process, I found a couple of more. The first one I'm going to tell you about is actually my favorite, that as I was going through and finding everything, this one is actually my favorite. I narrowed it down to 4, because I figured 4 was a little bit easier than trying to pull as many as I could find. That's a whole lot of information and a little bit of time. So I pulled 4. The first one is Test of English Language Learning. If you just Google TELL test, it will come up. This test is actually self-administered, and you give them an iPad or an Android tablet, whichever your district uses, and it's app-based. So you hand it to them and it scores it by itself. You don't have to do any of the scoring yourself, which I think is one of the best parts of this one. It's closely aligned with WIDA standards, and the scores are mapped the same as WIDA. So that's another real good thing about it. The scores are still mapped the same. There are 3 assessment parts. There's a screener, there's a diagnostic assessment, and progress monitoring. There's 2 diagnostics, and then there's also 8 progress monitoring. So it'll give you a baseline, because even though you get those access scores at the beginning of the school year, just like any other kids, there's some regression. So that score is still not going to be completely accurate. So you can give them another one at the beginning of the school year so you have a baseline to see where you're going. Like I said before, it automatically scores those responses. It's delivered on the iPad or an Android tablet. It can be administered offline. All you have to do, you have to have internet access to go in to validate that the test ID, the child is who you're testing, and then you can pull it back offline. So on an iPad, all you gotta do is just pull that little, or even Androids, you can just pull that little thing up, knock the Wi-Fi off, and then turn it back on at the end so that it can upload all that information, and then it will score it for you. This test only takes about 20 to 50 minutes to administer. And just like WIDA, TELL has a secure site. It has a secure site that you go in, you put all that information in, and you upload your roster, you set up the test, you assign them, and that's also where you access all of your reports in that system. So that was probably a way that with that elevation, there's probably a way that those 2 systems probably talk somehow. So if you use that, you can just pull all that information over there without having to print it out and all of that nice stuff. The reports are are several reports that you can print. There are district reports, there are school reports, there's classroom teacher reports, and then there's even reports for the student level. So you can print out those reports and show them how they're doing, which I think is a really good thing, because sometimes not all of these kinds of things have a report that are student friendly. So they have a specific student report. Then the results are immediately available through the TELL platform. And then, like I said, the scores are mapped the same. Each student must have a license. So it's each kid has a license. I'll tell you about prices at the end. And then this test, you watch video clips, you interact with the different pictures, and then you answer questions out loud. So there's a listen part, there's a write part, a read, and a speak part in it. I have more notes about that. And I actually have, if you go on the website, I actually emailed it to myself so I could get to it pretty quick. There's, it goes through some of the videos just to show what it is. And it's a K through 12 test. So you can give it to all grade levels. Well, there's 8. It says that you can do it throughout the year. There's there's a screener, 2 diagnostics, and then 8 progress monitoring. I wouldn't say do it as often as you would do any other progress monitoring, just because I'm sure they're getting a whole lot of other. But the time factor isn't that. When you look at the time, when I looked at the time of some of the others, some of them took almost 2 hours, where this one's only 50 minutes tops, and they're doing it by themselves. So even if you got a few at a time and you're in a big enough room, you can put them in different areas. And if you give them the headphones that have the earbuds that have speakers on them, you can separate them so that they can do it, since they're interacting with it and they're pulling everything. I'll go ahead and show you. There's a tell it part, and you speak in the situation. So it's giving you specific situations to talk in. It tells them why would you use that umbrella? What would you use that umbrella for? So they're telling in a situation, and then you're saying words and they're reading words.
Say what's in the picture.
So you say what's in the pictures. I think from what I've seen, looking at this, it seems like it's very friendly for kindergartners. And it's going to be based on their level. So they're not all going to take the same test. Because a kindergartner and a 12th grader aren't going to need to know the same thing, just like anything else. Or the skills that they should have are not the same. So, so speak in the situation, tell about the umbrella, and then reading the words.
Read these words out loud.
And so then they've got to read those certain words. And then there's also the retell it. And I actually really liked this one, especially for the little ones.
When it's your turn, tell the story in your own words.
This one, it showed pictures. It didn't only just tell them a story, it had different pictures. And it went through the story 2 times, and then they have to tell what happened again.
It's Crazy Clothes Day at school, and the winner will get 2 free pizzas. Gabriel wants to win. He puts on a white t-shirt with a green tie, light blue pants, and his super silly socks that go to his knees. He adds a purple top hat and black and white sneakers. Gabriel wins first prize. His family will enjoy his 2 free pizzas.
Okay, now listen again.
It's Crazy Clothes Day at school, and the winner will get 2 free pizzas.
I really like that it went through, it shows the pictures so they have something to look at. It's not just, okay, here's this, now tell me what's going on in this picture. It actually gives them something to reference back to. And somehow it scores it itself, which to me is amazing. If it can score it for me, and because some of them are, there's a couple of the others, there's online and paper, and some of them are only paper, which means you have to sit down and you're the one that's going to have to score that. But this one scores it for you. And another thing I like, it's not boring voices. Because some things that you listen to, it's boring, it's monotone. And they get bored, you can tell they're bored, which means they're not paying attention, which means you're not even really getting a really good sense of what they do know, because they're bored and they don't care. They're just trying to hurry up and get through it. So it's colorful and it's very interactive, and you're not talking to them, which makes it even better because they're just talking to the iPad, which most of them, they like to do that. They like to just do stuff like that. And then there's read it.
Read the sentence silently to yourself and then do what it says.
So there's several different where it just tells them to read it and then move the flower pot. So touch the empty flower pot. So they just want them to touch the flower pot. And then there's another one where it tells them to move the flower pot next to this, or move this next to this. So it's very interactive. So even the kindergartner, most kindergartners that I know how to play with an iPad or a tablet. They've got one at home. Even most of the kids at our school, they know what to do. Or they've got mama's phone and they know what to do with mama's phone. And then this one, they're finding an error.
Touch the word that's wrong.
So they just have to read the sentence and find which one's wrong and then tell how to spell it correctly. Write it.
Of course, I noticed in that example, the one that's wrong is the longest word in the sentence. All the rest of them are very short.
Yeah. That is, but it's also a word where Y, they've probably learned sometimes sounds like a different sound. So, and I don't know, some of them might not catch it. I know quite a few kids. My own child might not even catch it going through it. So, especially if she's just reading it. So, I mean, I do that. I'm reading and I'm like, oh, that's right. But then I look back later, I'm like, oh, that was not right. And then like this one, and of course, this probably looks like it's for a little bit older, completing the sentence.
Write one word to complete the sentence.
So you just find a word that completes the sentence.
This is a puddle. Now you write the word puddle.
Are they writing it with their finger?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're writing, or a stylus, whatever you give them to write it. And then the last part is tap it.
Touch the yellow paint. Touch the paintbrush. Touch the hammer on the bench.
And then put the last part, put the word in the sentence.
Move the word into the right place to complete the sentence.
So, and maybe some of the appeal to this one for me was that it scores it for you. I think that's the biggest appeal. It scores it for you. And it's very interactive. It's very interactive. And you could test multiple kids at one time. Of course, you're in there to facilitate and monitor while they're doing it so that if they do get stuck or there is some kind of issue, you're in there, but you're not the one administering it one-on-one, which is so time-consuming. You can get quite a few in a room at a time. And to me, that was I was like, oh, that was a big appeal for me. And the fact that it scored it, and it generated those reports that were on all different levels. So you could give a District 1 to the Title III coordinator. You can have teacher ones for the school, for the principals at different schools. You can hand that principal a report for your kids. Then there's the teacher one, and then you have one that's specifically designed for your kids so that they know what they need to work on. Because even the little ones, they're really good at knowing red means stop, and red isn't the greatest color, and that's an area they need to work on. And I'm not sure that that's even the colors, but that's, I would imagine, because I couldn't find those reports as I was going through everything. but I'd imagine it's probably something similar to that, red, yellow, and green. That's usually what's used. So they know red is not the best. Even at 5 years old, they know red's not the best. But I liked that there's a report that you can go over with them and show them where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are and what do we need to work on, and you can like conference with them just like they do in the other, but it's a little bit more understanding for them. That's what I actually found the most about this one too. But you guys have any more questions about this one?
I think we're waiting for cost.
For cost? Okay, well then I'll just go ahead and tell you that instead of waiting until the very end. I was gonna wait. This one is, I actually have the contact for Tennessee. I've been emailing him to find out. It's $18.75 per child for the bundle. You can buy each piece separately, but it's more, I think, he didn't tell me the individual prices, but I would imagine that it's more cost effective to just bundle those 3 areas, the diagnostic, the progress monitoring, and the screener all in one. I know that we already have a screener, but I'm sure it wouldn't be, this is going to show you a little bit more of what they can do on their own rather than them just sitting and doing it that way. And it's more interactive. And for me, it's a little bit, the voices, the speaking's a little bit better than some of the other I've heard where it's very monotone and I get bored just sitting in there listening to it. Which I didn't think $18.75 for those, I mean, 8, 9, 10, 11 tests. 11 tests per kid.
$18.75
per child.
Per child. Okay.
Per child. It's bundled. It's per child. It is per child. Which I even calculated myself, like it would be under $400 for just for the kids in my district, and I have 18 active ones. So I really didn't think that was bad considering what I know some other things cost, and it's not that bad.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
And it does a lot of the work for you. And when I was looking at the others, there's grade bands. It's only this much, but it's an entire grade band that you're paying for.
When you monitor, like the thing I don't like with the progress monitoring with it, is that time frame, is how long, because I feel like our ESLs are tested so much anyway. And then also with your RTI, your progress monitoring only takes about 5 minutes per student. So, like, can you just progress monitor the retail effort portion and the scores come on in?
From what I could tell, you could just assign, because you're going into a system and you're assigning tests. You're assigning what you want them to do. So I would think that you could. So I mean, if you know that a child knows certain things.
Or your grade level, like first grade retail it would be, to me, very beneficial moving into up to WIDA. I would just like to progress monitor that, and that's all. Because I guess that speaking is there.
And there's, well, tell it, speak in the situation that you tell things to. You tell things to that one. I'm not exactly sure, I can't tell you that for sure, but from what I could see with you having to go into a system to assign it, I would think that you could assign what you wanted, that you wouldn't have to. I mean, in Ames Web, you can only take what you want, even whenever you are doing if you're doing it online and not paper-based, you can only do what you want them to do. So I would think that you would be able to, so that it's not as time-consuming, even though whenever I looked at the others, some of them were kind of even more time-consuming, and you were having to sit one-on-one to do it. And this one was the shortest one. From what I could tell, it was the shortest one.
Can I ask you just to confirm, that's for 1 year, $18.75 for 1 year for one child?
Okay, this is the one I found the least on, but it was one that a friend of mine said that some schools use. It's the Woodcock-Munoz. And this one has an online version and it has a paper-based version. There are some parts you can do online. This one specifically is a paper, and this one said that it can also be used as part of a 504 dyslexia to identify dyslexia for ELs, which I thought was because you don't find a lot of things that you can do that with, and that's hard to even, it's hard to justify whenever you're doing it. There's actually 2 different ones. There's a revised normative update of it, and then there's this one. The cost of this one, it's measured, it does reading, writing, listening, and comprehension. It's K through 12. Actually, it says kindergarten to graduate school. You can use it for graduate school. If you have an EL in graduate school, you could use this to progress monitor them. This one is for the kit. Like I said, this is one that I couldn't really find a whole lot on. I Googled and Googled and searched and searched and searched, and I just really didn't find a whole lot on it, but it was one that I found. And for this test, it's $568 for the complete kit. And then there's add-ons. For a package of 25 of the protocols, it's $24. So I guess that initial cost is expensive, but then you just have to get the protocols as you need them. But then again, it's paper-based, and it consumes a lot of time because you have to sit individually. There is no group testing. There is no, you're going to have to do it on your own. And especially in some larger districts, I don't know if that's even remotely feasible, which was why the other one was really appealing to me. And I don't even have that many children. But I do, with progress monitoring and having to keep up with everything, it's a lot of information, and then having to try and get those scores and learning how to score it. You're gonna have to learn how to score it, and some tests that can be time consuming, and if it's anything like Woodcock-Johnson, it's not going to be super, super simple. I've never seen it. Has anybody else seen it? Have you ever seen this one?
I haven't seen this. I've given Woodcock-Johnson.
See, I've given Woodcock-Johnson, and it's not difficult, but it's time consuming.
Exactly.
It's time consuming, especially if you start giving all the different subtests that are in there. And there's quite a few. I think with the Woodcock-Johnson, there's 14 subtests, something like that. So this is probably very similar to that test. Since it's in the same family of tests.
So this may be a really stupid question. Do you progress monitor all your EL students?
No, I've not. This is not even something that this was something for me that I wanted to do too, just to find, because that way I can look at, well, if we're so close to exiting, what do I really need to hone in on this year? What do we really need to work on? Are we good in speaking, but listening we're not so great at? Or if we've got writing down, but we don't have reading down, whatever the case may be. And then some of these go a little bit further in, because sometimes you're like, but they do it with me. Why aren't they doing it in the classroom, or why can't they do it on a test? And you might find something, oh, well, now it all makes sense. It might tell you something that you didn't realize before, because you're working so closely with them that they just do it, and because they know your expectations. They know how you work, and they know what to do, but then they get away from that situation, and yeah, their comfort level goes away. Or maybe there's just some tiny little something that you didn't realize that this might catch if you're looking a little bit more closely, a little bit more often, even though there might not be a whole lot of time for that, even though there's not a whole lot of time for that. And then this one is the SELP 2. It's a K through 12 test 2. It evaluates listening, reading, writing, and speaking. There are 4 different forms. There's 2 long forms, and then there's 2 abbreviated forms of it. It gives a baseline. You have a baseline for the beginning, obtain multiple data points that evaluate their progress. It assesses got 2 full length and then 2 abbreviated forms to provide progress monitoring throughout the year. So this one, at most, you could do 4 times, but if they're in the same grade band, I guess it's the same test you'd be looking at. And then this one has added new academic language items to measure their proficiency in written and spoken language of the classroom. And then it's aligned with Common Core state standards and WIDA standards. It also, something that this one, it distinguished between social and academic language and their capabilities in both areas. And this one uses ready results for reporting. And there are different bands. There's a kindergarten band, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, just like the WIDA access bands. It's the same bands. This one takes 1 hour and 35 minutes to 2 hours to administer. So that was really the downfall of this one for me. I also have, this one has a lot, when I say a lot of different prices. Oh, and this one has 5 different levels of performance. It splits it up. There's pre-emergent, emergent, basic, intermediate, and proficient. It has 5 different levels. And
Is it paper pencil or online?
It's paper pencil. Now, the scoring is online. You can do scoring online. And this, I printed this out and I thought, whoa, that's a whole lot of, some of it doesn't look that expensive, but when you start putting all those separate pieces together, it's very, very expensive. Because there's a full-length E version, there's an abbreviated E version, there's a full-length F, is it F or is it G? F, a full-length F, a full-length abbreviated F, and then there's the exam kit and the protocols, and then there's a practice test, there's a practice test you can give them. That's only $15 for 10 of them, but if you have 500 kids in your district and you're going to give this every year, you can only use protocols one time. That gets quite costly, way more expensive than the $18.75 per kid per year. Way more expensive. And then there's not just one grade band. There's 5 grade, well, kindergarten, 1, 2, 3, 5 bands. There's 5 different bands you're looking at. You're not just buying for, that's going to do for everybody. It's, you've got.
You have to buy separately for each grade band.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then if you're going to use the ready results, web-based, where you, there's 2 different ones. There's a web-based ready results where you can scan and score the report online. The license for that is $1,000 annually. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it's $1,000. But if you do it where you key it all in, it's only $500. And then I'm thinking that it charges you extra per report.
This is pretty amazing. I'm like, what districts are even using this?
I'm not sure.
I mean, you know? Yeah.
I'm not sure. This is not one of the ones that that I was told about. Now, Woodcock Munoz was one of the ones that I was told about in Texas from some of my friends.
And I do like the being able to distinguish between the social vocabulary and academic. I do like that component, but that's probably done.
Yeah, that you can.
That much time.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That's the whole thing. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
Kids will class for that many days to test that many students, that much time.
Well, even for me, I'm not pulling them out of PE. If you took them for 2 hours, potentially they're missing recess, or they're missing their special areas, or they're missing something like that. And do you really want to walk a kindergartner back to their teacher and say, oh, you missed recess, but have fun? I mean, you don't want to do that because more than likely they're going to be bouncing off the walls. They just had to sit for almost 2 hours and do this test. Not that a kindergartner you would sit with 2 hours, but any length of time to get relatively accurate data, because if you keep pulling them at different times, it's not going to be even that accurate. Because today we were in a really good mood, but this morning I got in trouble because I threw my backpack across the room and Mom got mad at me. So today I'm not having a good day. And they're not going to test for you as well. So you run into those things. And then when you get to middle school, well, so-and-so said something about so-and-so, so now I'm upset and I'm not even going to talk to you today because I don't feel like it. So then your results are skewed and you're not even getting a real accurate picture of what the kid knows. And then there's the cost factor of all those little costs in one, and then having to pay for the license to score it unless you score it by hand. And I don't.
What does SELP stand for?
Stanford English Language Proficiency Test.
Okay, I thought it might have been sort of expensive.
Sort of expensive language proficiency test. That is a really good one because it is sort of expensive.
Because just maybe it came from Stanford.
See, just for $50 for the kindergarten test, you get the directions for administering full-length scannable response booklet, writing response booklet. That's just writing. That's just writing. And that's only 10. That's only 10 of them. That's only 10. And then you've got to buy for all 5 grade bands. Now, they're not all that expensive, but then you get to 3 through 5. And when you get to the other ones, it's not just a flat $50. Kindergarten, there's a flat $50, but then you get into 1, 2, there's a $30 fee and a $50 fee because you need the directions, which that's going to be a one-time thing. But then those test booklets are another $50.
So, in directions are kind of like those records you were talking about.
They disappear.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're going to give a test. You're like, where? Oh, I got to print it out again. Or that's my experience. That's my experience.
So here's the fine print, though, that I think may determine who's using these. So just like, if a parent comes in and requests, their child to go through the IEP program, they want their child tested. They're going to be given the Woodcock-Johnson, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the achievement test. That's the achievement test.
I'm just saying the version of, so now we have the Woodcock Union. So it's the parent who comes in requesting their child be tested in English language proficiency. Those are the districts that are probably having to that brings up a really good point. Whenever you are looking at kids that you think there's something else going on, this is not just a language proficiency issue, but how do I prove it? Especially if it's parent request, your psychologist or whoever gives that test is going to give the Woodcock-Johnson. That's the achievement test. So if you're giving a similar test for language proficiency, you're looking at apples and apples. You're not looking at, well, this test says this, and the scores are totally different. And in that case, it is good because which
then you
could
can
also work with your gifted ESLs.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's something else you could look at because they are similar tests. They're in the same family. Because whenever I pulled up the Woodcock-Munoz, it came up with the Woodcock-Johnson too, which I kind of figured that they were together because of the names. But that is something to look at. And if you did buy it, it could potentially last a while. It's not as if, unless the scoring part, because which that one I'm not sure how. I think with Woodcock-Johnson, you buy that many tests, you have that many times to score them. You have that many times to type it in. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. So I'm pretty sure that's the way Woodcock-Johnson is. You don't put any of the scores in, do you? See, I think that's the way it is with our district being so small. We don't go through all those protocols. So if we had to pay an annual license, I think that would be, I think it's you pay so much and you can score it like that online for however many you've got. But then there's not only the full-length test you're buying for. If you want more than just one version and you want an abbreviated version, well, then you've got all those costs again per grade band. And sadly, they're not. If it's an abbreviated version, you would think it was the price would be a little bit more abbreviated. It's not. It's about the same. You have to pay $50 for the directions, $50 just for the administration manual, and then the $42 for the response booklet and the writing booklet. And the higher you get, the more parts you have to have. So once you get to 3 through 5, you've got a reusable test booklet that you can use. That's a set of 10, but it's paper. Those 10 might last a little while, but you're eventually going to have to buy more because they're going to fall apart. So I know how my twisting and turning it and folding it and it's paper. What if it's sitting there and somebody knocks something on it? There went all those. And then having to buy the response booklets in addition to that times 5 grade bands. So that's not, the exam kit's not that bad. The exam kit is $40. So that's not bad, but I think the consumable part of it would start getting a little pricey when you have hundreds and hundreds of kids in a district. Then this is the last one that I found, the IPT. This is the one that my friend said that the school district that I used to teach at in Texas uses it, and I think it's because it has the early child, it has the preschool form of it. So this one tests oral language, reading and writing, and early literacy. And the early literacy for this one is K1. It's easy to administer, it's immediate results, no outside scoring, you score it as you go. It's aligned with TESOL standards. It tests oral English, listening and speaking, reading and writing in English. And then there's the pre-IPT, that's for the preschool children that don't take tests, and it's centered around stories. It says that there are no complicated formulas to score it. That's what it said. So I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe it's just, if it's the same one that they gave while I was there, you do score it as you go. You're just counting up points and write it down. You just write it down. There's an IPT 1 and 2. There's alternate forms for pre and post testing. And then the IPT 2, because it goes in, it's 3 different bands. There's the pre-IPT English for 3 and 4-year-olds. Then the IPT 1 is oral English, is K through 6, and then it's 6 through 12. So the IPT 2 is also normed for 6th graders. So you can give them either one. And I guess that would be a lot whenever you're looking at where they fall, how proficient you know that they are, to know which one you'd give them. So if you have a higher one that's about to exit, you'd probably give them the 2. If you've got a lower level proficient child, you'd go with level 1. And that's kind of nice because that is those years where you're kind of, are we or aren't we? Are we or aren't we? Are you going to stick with me all through high school, or are you going to be able to test out? Yes, scored as you go. That's what it said. It's scored as you go. So you're just tallying up things, and then you can look, I guess, if you just look back and it tells you where they fall, where you fall in it.
And it has a band. You know, like how the WIDA has a 27 as the magic score. It has like that. It has the different columns from what I remember, and
then it gives you like a composite. And it's been, I'm pretty sure that whenever I was teaching pre-K, that this is the same test that we gave, the same screener we gave at the beginning of the school year to all kids, because this one has, is this the one that has the Spanish version too? I think this one has a Spanish version too, so that they can test that. And that's how they figured out who went into the transitional bilingual class and who went into the regular bilingual class, to know how proficient they were. I think it was something about if you scored a 4 in both, you went into transitional bilingual because you were fluent in both languages at 4. And to be truly proficient in 2 languages at 4 years old is amazing. But then, like I said, with going into that program, they were getting to read, write, and everything in both languages, which is amazing for a 4-year-old. This one has the proficiency levels. There's a beginning, there's early, intermediate, early, advanced, and advanced. And some parts of this could be group administered, some parts couldn't. Of course, if you're doing writing and reading, that part can be group administered, whereas the other parts would have to be individual, which is a lot like old tests we used to give, where you could give some parts whole group, but then other parts you can't. And that's where the time-consuming part comes in, is that individual part where you're having to speak to that child. And sometimes it's like that, and you've just whizzed through quite a few, but then you've got some of them that are, you're just sitting there and it's like, just give me an answer. Just give me an answer. It does assess listening and speaking, reading and writing English. The prices on this one, for the oral English part, that's another thing of this. Not only are there different bands, there's different sections, and each section is a different price. You have to buy the different parts of the test. This part is done, this one's scored as the students are being tested. There's sample items, and then there's an examiner script. And then for this one, for the oral language part, for K through 6, it's $368 just for that portion of the test, for the 2 different forms that they have. And then the online test of this is $132. And it does test in English and Spanish.
So $132 for
online.
Fast. This now gives you 50. Up to 50.
And then it's $368 for the pictures that go along, the test pictures that go along with it.
They're on the card.
Yes. Even though you can do scoring online while you're doing that, the pictures are still, so that it scores it immediately online as you're going and you're clicking, but you still have those pictures. And to have 2 different forms, each form is $154. So if you only did 1 form, that's not so bad, but to have both forms. And I guess if you're progress monitoring, you don't want, if you're going to do it a couple of times or more than, you'd want something a little bit different. I mean, I know you give the benchmarks that are all the same. I don't know who else uses Ames Web, but the benchmarks are the same, but the progress monitoring is not the same. So, and I think that was another thing. I think with the first one that I went over, that was really the other part of it. There was variety. You weren't just going to see it in one situation. There were 8 different progress monitoring tests you could give and 2 different diagnostics. So even if you used one of those 2 diagnostics to do a benchmark and then progress monitored whatever in between, you're doing it you have a baseline to go by, and then you have the variable things to look at too, to see if they can do it out of that context. And that diagnostic is on that grade band and where they should be. So then the progress monitoring, you can see where that gap is closing. And I'm not so sure that this would do that with just 2 forms of the test. And then each band has that same cost. So there's the 3 different bands that are going to have that $132, $154 for only 50 tests for the $132. So that gets, where's all that money going to come from type of thing. So, because I know the money that I get for there's no way I could buy this. Now, I could probably find money, or at least half of it, to pay for the other. And just money that I have in my teacher account, I could almost pay for that with what I have sitting there and saved up for 1 year. But then next year it would be, hey, can you help me out a little bit more this year? And then with this test, there's also the reading and writing. There's reading and writing English. So there's only 2 separate tests, but there's the cost. And that goes into the same thing. And then the reading and writing can be paper or online. It can be done, which that part can be done as a group if you're doing it online, and probably even if you're doing it paper. Because even if you do it online, I think you're going to have to go back in. See, online administration by computer, paced appropriately. It says there's no that's immediate results, and I don't know with the writing, if it's not scoring it for you, how it's scored immediately.
We had to score it.
See, and I might have looked over it, but I remember they were saying that there would be rubrics. So it's not, that part's not scored immediately. You're going to have to go back and score that. Which I know I keep going back to that first one, but that one is really truly the one that I really, truly, it's like, oh, that's not so bad. Now all of them were pretty much aligned with all the standards that we're supposed to be looking at. But even with this one, the reading assesses vocabulary and context, reading for understanding, reading for life skills, and language usage. So I did like that it wasn't just academic vocabulary or just what they do at home. It was a broad range of what they were. I got a little bit more time. This is going way faster than I had expected.
You can always let us know.
Yes. I think that was probably my goal in the back of my head whenever I was writing all this down. And then with writing, it tests their ability to generate writing that reflects common usage and academic grade level. So once again, even in the writing part, it's taking what's very common for them to write about, things that are common to write about, and things at school that are not as common. And then there's the early literacy, and early literacy is a doozy. It has 8 reading subtests and 4 writing subtests. Early literacy for K1.
It take you a month.
Yes, and that, see, in the reading and writing, there are 3 bands that do not include K1. It's 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, 12. So that's reading and writing just for that. Well, then you've just upped. There's some more.
One thing I use for just reading, I mean, it's nothing diagnostic and it's not all parts of the WIDA, but I use the Reading A to Z website, and it has the benchmark passages.
And they use that this summer for the Read to Be Ready summer camps. That's what they use. They use Reading A to Z.
It's around $100 a year, I think, for that subscription. But yeah, the readings are they're interesting for the kids. It has nonfiction and fiction, and the benchmark passages are really helpful just to give you an idea of their reading level. Of course, that doesn't help you with writing or speaking and all that.
And I like the running records.
Yeah, that's what I use.
But that is what they use during the Read to Be Ready summer camps. They use those, and that the kids like the one story that we used. And I used reading A to Z with pre-K when I taught pre-K. I haven't really used it since I left pre-K.
There's a lot of close reading passages on there. I mean, it's a really great website, but
I found a new one called Common Lit, L-I-T, and it's for grades 5 and up, but it has a lot of passages and it zones in on, it's got fiction and nonfiction, and it's all free, but it zones in on different skills that you might need, genres, different literature types, and it zones in on different skills that, you know, like a lot of my students were struggling with summarizing, so we've been working on some summarizing some stories from there, and I really like it. And I love ReadWorks. If you've never used ReadWorks.
I use ReadWorks.
It's free also, and it's K-12.
I do use ReadWorks. I use a lot of those to do close reads with,
Right.
And then then there's not just the reading passages and the articles. There's also, they have units where there's articles that go with those units, but then it tells you books to go get that go along with those lessons, and the whole entire lessons are there.
That's the way Common Lit is. Like, I'm doing a unit with my middle schoolers about Shel Silverstein. It's comparing some of his poetry and stuff, summarizing some of his poetry, and comparing themes and stuff, and that's what I liked about it, and it also has some book units on it also. I've used both, but I found it because I've worn my kids out with ReadWorks, and they're like, and the Common Lit has more of it has a few of the reading for details and referring back to this question also, but it has a lot more of the writing that we're getting into more now, where they want you to write.
And in ReadWorks, the writing questions don't really come until the higher leveled passages, and that's the problem I find. I mean, that's the one thing I see with that is finding those, because in ReadWorks it also has the Lexile levels. You can search by Lexile level and grade level, and it's hard to find those lower Lexile levels with the questions you need them to have to be able to do the writing, to analyze and write.
Interpret and all that stuff.
It has the comprehension there, but not the writing. But not the writing.
Harder academic rigor.
I think second grade it starts having, in the second grade passages you have to start writing questions, but they're not very in-depth.
And with Common Lit, which it doesn't start till 5th grade, but it's still, the rigor's there.
Let me write that down because I've used ReadWorks, but not Common Lit. Somebody might have said something, and I wrote it down somewhere, and then what is that? That's probably one of them, I'm sure. Yeah. Then the IPT. There's the early literacy part, and like I said, that one's pretty long. It assesses reading and writing. It's appropriate for kindergarten and 1st grade. It's group administered at least, but then you have to score it. It's designed for younger test takers, but it's paper pencil only. It's paper pencil only, which for the 1st graders isn't really going to, they're taking their part of their WIDA online too. So they need to learn. I think that's the drawback of some of them, the paper pencil.